Raising the Bets is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to Raising the Bets. We're a Catholic couple raising 5 kids outside of Boston. Join us as we share the joys and challenges of marriage, homeschool, and our adventures near and far as we make sense of the world and experience the best parts of our culture. I'm Don Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
So, Melanie, it was hot as blazes today. We finally caught up with the rest of the country and got the heat.
Yeah, it was warm.
It was warm. It was like Texas mid-March, May, yeah. It was, yeah, it got up to 95 today here, I think, but officially in Boston was 90. I think because it's at Logan, which is on the water, so that's always cooler there. But not a heat wave because the heat is going to go away. The extreme heat is going to go away tomorrow. And we'll be back into the I think they said like upper 70s for most of the week and maybe low 80s, which is nice. We've had the best weather it's like the best June I can remember. Like there have been Junes where it's like rainy and 55 all month.
you know, we're gonna have like listeners like canceling their pledges because they're jealous of our weather.
I know. Come visit us in New England. We're having good weather here. Yeah, it's been nice. So before we get started, there was one thing I wanted to talk about last week, but we had a sort of a jam-packed episode because we were catching up after coming back from our camping trip, and there was so much to talk about. But I wanted to talk about something really cool that happened a few weeks ago. So we have our own personal websites. I have betnet.com, you have thewindarksea.com, and my blog has been around for 22 years or longer.
Longer than I've known you.
Yes. Right. My blog predates you in my life. It is an older relationship.
I'm not jealous, really.
And then I created your website for when we were dating.
When we were dating.
Yes. So, gentlemen, think of that as a way of finding a wife, is make her a website. No. And then there are a couple other websites that are on the same server. I have it's the 22-year-old blog is so big now that it needed its own server at Bluehost. So I don't know why I told you that, but it doesn't really matter. But it's been having some issues. It's getting creaky in its old age, and it was running slow. It was giving me error messages. The email was starting to act funny. So, and that sort of stuff is beyond my technical knowledge. So I went to this website called Upwork.com where you can hire freelancers. And so I looked for someone who had the skills to do sorts of the web admin, sysadmin sorts of skills. And I ended up connecting with this guy named Alexei from Ukraine. He's from Kharkiv, Ukraine, which if you've been following the news, you know that place has been undergoing some really bad things lately, especially Kharkiv. And he got to work and did some stuff for me. And as we were finishing up, he did a great job too. If you're looking for someone to do some web admin work remotely, I'll recommend him. You just let me know, and I'll email the details to you. But I got to talk to him. I asked him, like, can I ask you a personal question? We did a Skype call, and his English is pretty good, and it's better than my Russian, which he says all Americans say to him, by the way. Like, he apologizes for his English, and then all Americans say it's better than my Russian or Ukrainian. Mm-hmm. And so lots of dad jokes. So we were talking. I asked him, is it okay if I ask you a personal question? Like, are you okay? Like, are you, I mean, it says you're from Ukraine, so I just want, are you safe? Are you okay? It's like, yeah. I'm in the western part of the country. My wife and my daughter are in Denmark. But of course, he didn't say it, but men of fighting age can't leave the country. They're not, it's illegal. They have to stay. And he said he's been helping his church help other people. And he told me about how his family, when the war first started, they were in the tunnels, in the subway tunnels for a week, and then they got out of town and all that sort of stuff. But he was talking about his church, and he asked me what church I go to. I told him I was Catholic, and I asked him if he was Orthodox, and he said, no, he's evangelical, actually, which is kind of interesting. And so it was this really nice moment. I told him, we're praying for you. I kind of got a little emotional because, like, this is a guy who's living in a war zone, like under the gun, literally, and I was like, my family is going to pray for you and your family, and God bless you. And this isn't much money. It wasn't, it was a suitable amount of money, but it's not a ton of money that we can give him. But I said, if I ever have other stuff, I'll definitely come back to you because you did such a good job. And I just feel so good about supporting him, this guy from Ukraine who's doing what he can. I love this is what I love about the internet. Like, I would never otherwise connect with a person like that and work with him and help him and pray with him. And he prayed for me. And, it's just so cool. I really like that. So, if you take a moment in your prayers, if you remember, just to, or to either pray for Alexei and his family, or to, remember when you're saying your prayers for all the things that someone asked me to pray for. That's what I do that a lot, because I never remember specifics, but it was really cool. So let's talk about what's been going on this week. The big thing this week was Isabella had her wisdom teeth out.
Yeah.
That's been coming for a long time.
A very long time. I think the original referral from the doctor was back in October.
Poor thing.
She's been in pain for a while, and this week was rough, but she says she's glad that it's no longer hanging over her head, and she knows that once the surgery pain goes away, that her mouth will feel a lot better.
And the reason it's taken so long was if you recall, last fall we were unable to be in our home and everything was in an uproar, and we were so far from home most of the fall and into the winter, and then just getting settled back in. And then when we really started in earnest to try to get things set up, we had huge problems with the insurance. They wanted us to pay thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket.
The first dentist who we actually had the referral for made the appointment with us, took my insurance information. Then I got to the appointment and they didn't actually take our insurance after all.
Right. And there was confusion because our regular health insurance has a pediatric dental benefit, but we also have a family dental plan that we pay for separately, like that covers the whole family. And for some reason, this minor pediatric dental benefit wants to assert control over our dental benefits. And it's like, no, this is better. And I don't want to go into all the details of it because it's tedious, but it's just this huge problem. We still ended up having to pay a bunch of money out of pocket, which we are hoping we'll actually get back reimbursed.
Hopefully,
Lord knows that's a battle yet to be fought. But I'm just glad that she's got the wisdom teeth out. But she's been a real trooper. I mean, I haven't heard her really complain at all.
You've missed a little bit of it.
I've missed it. Right. I've been, while I'm working and stuff like that. But she's not like moping around. I mean, and this is now it's like 6 days later, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she went swimming today. I mean, she seemed to be almost back to normal. I mean, she's still a little tender eating things. She's a little careful with eating things still, but in general, she seems to be doing pretty good. So, what else? So I mentioned swimming. We went to my brother's house today. He invited us over to go swimming in his house, and there was another couple of their old friends. We always see at there. The same groups of friends that always seem to come around, and they have a new granddaughter. John and Pauline are grandparents. It's kind of wild to think about, but they have a granddaughter who's about 1, and as soon as our kids saw her, like they were like, baby, and our kids love babies.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of wild. And in fact, especially Ben. And so they were commenting on like how Ben is so good, a 13-year-old boy, but he's so good with the baby. It's like, he just wants to be with the baby. And at one point,
loves babies.
He does. And in fact, he kind of told my sister-in-law and her friend that, oh yeah, I want to be a dad someday because I just love babies. And then they're like, oh, so he's just, and in fact, my brother sent me a text later saying how good our kids are and what a good job we're doing raising them, which was nice. It was nice to hear. So, really pleased to hear that. So other than that,
this has been for me the week of appointments.
Right. All the appointments I could put off till after our vacation.
Yeah. I think Friday was the only day I didn't have an appointment.
Yeah. We had, We had all the appointments, and then we had the roof being finished, and it's not quite finished. They have to come back and do one more thing. But yeah, it was just a lot of stuff. Oh, and Friday was the day I had to take the van to get new tires and a new battery. And I talk about sticker shock. I expected two new tires and a battery to be around $500, which was that's a ouch. It was $900.
Wow.
Yeah, the tires were like $400 each, or like remember the time a few years ago when we were going to the museum and we ran over a nail and got a flat, and we had to get a tire right there, and that was like $250. So since then, and that was maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah,
maybe 4 years ago even. Now, it's up to 400 something, and it's just ouch. Actually, when I told Dan, that my friend who's this Cub Scout leader who's also an auto mechanic himself, he doesn't do tires, so that's why I didn't take it to him. But he's like, "Oh, that's expensive. Where'd you go?" I'm like, "We went to our usual place." And he's like, "Well, I mean, they're nice people and all, but yeah, they're expensive." So maybe I think from now on, in fact, for this one, I always run things by Dan first. Hey, can you do this here? And if he doesn't, then I'll go with the other place. But yeah, that was a bit of a sticker shock. But and then so again, and all the appointments and stuff. Hopefully, this coming week, things will get a little quieter now. All right, let's talk about some food things. The first thing I want to mention is I made buffalo wings the other day. I went to our butcher that I raved about before, where we can get stuff for good prices, and I got 10 pounds of wings, and I made the soy sauce wings that I've mentioned before that the kids really love, but some of the kids really love spicy wings. So I made buffalo wings, and I use the method I use for it generally is I think it's something I adapted either from Cooks Illustrated or Food Network. I think it was a Cooks Illustrated method, and let me see if I can pull it up. And so it's still a fried buffalo wing, and so I take the wings, and I have a dry powder mix of Cajun seasoning, black pepper, salt, and cornstarch. And I put the wings in a bowl, throw the dry mix on it, and then coat it up, and then put it in the Dutch oven with the oil and cook it in that. And it makes it nice and crispy. Like the outside of the wings get really crispy, which is I really like. And then for the sauce, I think this worked out really well, because the last time I did this, I wasn't happy with the sauce, but this sauce was a little better. I combined a couple of different recipes. So Frank's Red Hot Louisiana Hot Sauce. That's the classic buffalo wing sauce. Tabasco sauce. So I would say 12 ounces of Frank's. For 3 pounds of wings, I used 12 ounces of Frank's Red Hot, a teaspoon of Tabasco sauce, a whole stick of butter. So I used 2 sticks, but I think 2 sticks ended up being too many.
It was too oily.
Yeah, it was too fatty. So 1 stick of butter, 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, although cider vinegar might have also worked pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But the vinegar adds a sharp note, more sharpness to it, that because the butter takes away some of the sharpness, that the fatty. So this adds some of it back in. Some a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1/2 teaspoon of Worcestershire. And then so you melt that all together in a pan. What I didn't do, what I did was I left it warm on the oven, on the stovetop. What I should have done was taken it off and let it cool a bit.
It's what we found after dinner. We were actually not terribly thrilled with the sauce at dinner time. It just didn't pack much of a punch. But what Sophie and I found when we were cleaning up is that by the end of dinner,
once the sauce had cooled,
once the sauce cooled and congealed, it was a lot thicker and it had a lot more flavor.
And because I had so much extra sauce, I saved it, put it in the fridge. There were some leftover wings, and the next day you reheated the sauce. It was more flavorful. So I think letting the sauce cool a bit, and then even like cool all the way and reheat it, like you make it the day before even, and then reheat it, is a really good. It packs a flavor punch. So that's what I'm going to do from now on. So I think that's a thumbs up on the wings. It's still it doesn't compare to the best wings I've ever had. Drover's hot wings from Wells, West Virginia. Those are the best hot wings ever. I've told the story before on the show.
Many times.
And many times I've told the story. And Melanie's tired of me telling the story. Just go back and look for the episode. Maybe I'll see if I can find the link. But those are the best hot wings ever. So another thing we made tonight for dinner was something out of the Milk Street Kitchen magazine. And it's Thai steak. So Thai, like Thailand. Thai steak and herb salad with spicy lime sauce. And so it basically just, you take steak and just grill it. And just like that. You just do steak regular that way. But the other part of it is you take some jasmine rice and you toast it, and then you grind. Once it's toasted, you grind it up into a powder, and you set it aside. And then you make the sauce. It's fish sauce, lime juice, sugar, red pepper flakes, white pepper, and then you make a little the herb salad is just shallots if you have it. So use scallions.
I use scallions.
Yep. Cilantro, mint, and optionally you can use a chili like pepper. Like
I also added basil since we had a lot of basil, and I love the combination of cilantro, mint, and basil. So. Yeah,
I mean it's not traditional to Thai. It's not Thai basil. Like although it's still close enough, I think.
It was just the basil we had, the Italian basil I had sitting on there.
Yeah. And then we actually added some romaine to kind of bulk up the salad bit. But you also, there was a miscommunication, and you were working off another recipe for us, and you made a ponzu sauce.
I thought that was even better than the Thai sauce, honestly.
So what was So
the ponzu was, I think a quarter cup of soy sauce, then some lime juice, lemon juice, I think a quarter cup of lemon, and or maybe it was an eighth of a cup of lemon. Anyway, lime and lemon juice, and then some rice wine vinegar and some mirin. And it was good.
So the way you serve it is you put you put the salad down, the greens, you put the steak on top, then you put the dressing, and then you kind of sift a little like the jasmine rice on top.
The powdered
jasmine rice,
toasted powdered rice.
Almost like whether like salt or like cheese or whatever, and you just kind of sprinkle it on top. And the combination of the sauce, the meat, and the jasmine rice were so good. And I kept thinking it has that very strong like meatiness to it, more so than just even the steak alone. And I think the jasmine rice really like. I don't know what it is, but to me it was almost like a cheesy thing, which it didn't taste like cheese, but had the same sort of punch.
I wasn't getting the cheese.
No, but you also not doing the Thai sauce. No, you were doing the ponzu.
It did add like a really pleasant toasted, like it added a depth, like the toasted rice flavor, both aromatic, because it was kind of an aromatic rice, and then also toasted on top of that. It was good.
Yeah, I was watching this video from America's Test Kitchen where they were talking about MSG and how glutamates and nucleotide. So some foods have glutamates and some have nucleotides, nucleo something or other. And when they combine, they have this burst of flavor and depth of umami, and so that I think that really came through in that dish. So it was really good. I was really pleased with that dinner. It was excellent. Yep. So that's what we've been eating, and I will put a link to the recipe for the Thai steak and herb salad to the Milk Street one. I guess maybe I'll put the recipe for the buffalo wings on my site and link to it. I'll find a way to get it on either on the show notes or on my website. So that's what we were eating. And we've got some other recipes we got out of the latest issue of Milk Street that we're going to be trying. There's some really interesting stuff in there. So and we have all the ingredients in the pantry, which is always good. All right, let's talk about stuff we've been reading and watching. I just want to mention a movie I watched this week starring Tom Holland and Mark Wahlberger called Uncharted. It's an adaptation from a video game, which is always kind of fraught.
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to think of a video game movie adapted from a video game that really was successful, and I can't think of one. I mean, Tomb Raider, the first Tomb Raider probably was the most successful. The Angelina Jolie one. Anyway, this is Uncharted, adapted from the video game of the same name, and it's an adventure treasure hunting sort of thing. It's like Tomb Raider, except it's these two dudes. It was okay. It wasn't like knock my socks off, but it was a fun little adventure. Pretty predictable, but there was like puzzles and, you know, treasure maps and find the thing and the implausible treasure at the end and implausible big set piece fight battle things and all that sort of stuff. So, but it was a big adventure film, and it's a popcorn movie. It wasn't great. If I was going to give it rated out of 4 stars, I'd say it was, 2.5 to 3. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't fantastic. Tom Holland is always fun to watch. I mean, he's always plays a pleasant character. I mean, it's hard for him to. I don't think he could ever be a bad guy. He's like such a nice young man.
Yeah, I would have a hard time with him as a bad guy.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg did a decent job, like playing his usual, snarky, sardonic, world weary sort of guy. Antonio Banderas was the scene chewing bad guy.
So fun.
Yeah, he was pretty good. There was a lot. It was filmed a lot in various locations, including in Barcelona. Sorry, gotta say it right. And that was kind of nice. I like when they film on location. And there was some bits that are in a church where they had to solve a puzzle in this old church. It all had to do with the treasure of who's the guy who did Around the World? Sir Francis Drake. Sam Francis Drake. He had a there's a legend of a treasure. I'll have to ask Jimmy Aiken about it if there's a real legend about that. So okay.
Well, so, Francis Drake did sail around the world, and he attacked lots of Spanish treasure ships. So
right, and but when he died before he got home, and when they got home, there was no treasure on the ships. That they had hidden the treasure before they got back.
I do not remember that part.
I think it was Drake. I'm not sure if it was Drake. I think it was Drake. Anyway, I'll go look it up. Whatever, it doesn't really matter. So, tell me about stuff that you've been reading.
Okay, I'm still binge reading the Vorkosigan saga by Lois McMaster Bujold. And it's fun. It's sort of space opera. My friend who recommended it to me said she thought that it hit the perfect trifecta of good world building, good characters, and good plot. And I have to agree. The world building is interesting. The characters are good, and the plots are fun.
Cool.
So that's been my bulk. I've also picked up a couple of new books of poetry and that I've been enjoying dipping into. Claude McKay's was one of the poets of the Harlem Renaissance. He was originally from Jamaica, but moved to New York. And his book, Harlem Shadows, which was originally published in 1922, was republished this year. I saw it in the bookstore, and it's got a really nice, attractive cover with like riffing on the Jamaica flag, yellow and green and black. And excuse me. So I've been reading that. I really, really like his poetry. The introduction of this really grabbed me. He talked about how his poetic sensibilities, he didn't have any formal training, but his poetic sensibilities were really formed from folk songs in Jamaica. And he really, even though he was a modernist poet, of the modern era, he was really drawn to writing in much more formal verse at a time when formal verse was falling out of fashion. So there's a really interesting sensibility to him where he's very modern, and yet there's kind of an old fashioned formalism to his poetry too.
And he was Catholic.
He I think about 6 years after his death, before his death.
That would be quite a treat.
Yes. He converted. He had been sort of radical communist fighting for workers' rights. But then in the end of his life, he did become Catholic.
Yeah, there's an episode of American Catholic History that I'll put a link to in the show notes where Tom and Noel did a whole episode on Claude McKay. So well worth listening to because he's an interesting guy. Very interesting. That was from earlier this year.
Yeah. So, and then I've also been reading, I got a review copy of a new book by one of my favorite poets, contemporary poets, A.E. Stallings. And
it would have to be contemporary, wouldn't it?
What?
Like, she'd have to be live now for it to be a new book.
Well, there are new books sometimes of like previously uncollected verse from poets. Anyway, She's a contemporary poet. She lives with her husband and kids in Greece, although she is from
She's American.
She's American. And I've been following her for a few years now. This book is a book of selected poetry. So it's poems from her other, selected from her previous published, and then a few new verses. But I don't actually, her first published book is really hard to get a hold of. I've never been able to find a copy that was within my price range. And so this collection has some of those poems, which is nice. But if you like contemporary poetry, she writes a lot about, she is also, in addition to being a poet, she's also a translator, and she's translated Greek and Roman writers and poets. And so a lot of her poetry is very influenced by the classical tradition. Her first book plays a lot with classical mythology and mythological characters. And then she also writes a lot about motherhood and family life. And so there's kind of a pleasant mix of classical themes, poems from the point of view of, Persephone or Medea, and then poems about her kids and living in Greece. And yeah, so if you like poetry,
you read me some of her poems, and I enjoyed some from her previous collections. Like there was some humor in it.
Yes, she's got a lot of very witty poems. One of my favorites is called Cast Irony, which is playing around with a lot of heroic metaphors that would feel not out of place in Homer. But then the subject of the poem is about her mother-in-law washing her cast iron pans with soap. So yeah.
And if you know anything about cast iron pans, you know how bad that is.
and needing to reseason them.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of playfulness, I think, is one of her hallmarks, and it's fun.
So I'm finishing up a book right now, a Star Wars book called Star Wars Ronin. So you might know, if you follow Star Wars at all, that last year, 2021, Star Wars had a short series on Disney Plus of Japanese-inspired Star Wars stories, Star Wars visions. They were anime based on various styles of anime, and the first one was called I think it was called Ronin. Or he was the Ronin. It was called The Duel. That's what it was. And so what they did was they took that short, it was a very short story, and expanded it into a whole novel. And it's kind of interesting because the style, it's like it takes place in a Japanese village, but they have lightsabers, and there's a Jedi and the Sith, and so
it very much feels the original animated show felt very much like a Kurosawa film.
Yes, very much inspired by Kurosawa. And so
Kurosawa, which is kind of coming full circle because wasn't Lucas also
was inspired by
Kurosawa,
yes.
Who was inspired by American Westerns.
Right. They're very full circles and circles. So they've taken that and sort of expanded and really it takes place not in the time period of the Skywalkers, but either many thousands of years earlier or some time period after the Skywalkers. It's sort of unclear.
I would kind of think earlier, but
I think that's my guess. And there's a whole, like, the Jedi are not in a Jedi order, but they're clans that serve the lords. So it's very feudal Japan. You have an empire and you have emperors, and the various feudal lords are always like one misstep away from attacking each other. And then there's a Sith lord and Sith witch who tried to rebel against the existing order, and they're kind of bad guys, but maybe in some ways they're not, or maybe they are. And I don't know, it's kind of complex. It's kind of long. I feel like they were kind of stretching it a bit. And there's this one character where it's an alien. So so it's not necessarily from contemporary political stuff, but the author assigns them the pronoun of they. So it's neither he or she. And so they keep saying they. And when authors use they for characters, or reporters for that matter, of people, it's so confusing. Like, I don't know who they're talking about sometimes. And then they went into the room. Well, did that character go into the room or the group of them? Like, I don't know. It's unclear. And it's like, stop doing that. Use a name then if you can't. You know, it's just it was sort of frustrating all the way through. There was nothing objectionable about it. There was no, interpersonal stuff or contemporary American political cultural stuff in it. So that all worked out. It's an okay novel. It's not the best Star Wars novel, but it's not terrible either. And if you like feudal Japan stories, like when I was younger, I'm old enough to have watched Shogun on TV when I was early teens, I guess. And then I read the book, which was really thick, and that really got me to a big Japanese samurai kick. If that's the sort of thing you like, or if you like anime, this might be the sort of thing for you. So maybe check it out. But it was all right. Star Wars Ronin. So continuing, we finished the Kenobi series.
We did, along with just about everybody else.
Yes, along with everybody else. And again, no spoilers, but very satisfying ending.
I thought it was mostly satisfying ending. I really liked the Kenobi plotline ending, but the Reva, the Inquisitors, and ending, I thought felt like it needed something else.
Well, my understanding, and I'm not absolutely certain of this, my understanding is they went back and put that in.
That would make sense because it didn't feel like it had been set up quite enough.
In the original ending, her storyline resolved in the second to last episode in that way that we saw.
Right.
But they added a scene in that and then added all of the stuff in the final episode to have her continue on for some reason.
I thought it had a germ of a really good idea. I liked what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
They just didn't sell me on her character's motivation. It felt honestly like they thought it would be a cool plot twist, and so they added it, but it didn't feel like it was integral to the character. It wasn't a character driven. It was more of a, isn't this a cool idea driven
right
moment. And I didn't feel like they'd done the work to sell me on the idea that her character's motivation led her to the choices that she made.
Right. Especially the two varying choices at the end, the two very different things that happened.
I felt like they could have sold me on it. They could have done some more work with her character, done some more writing, added some dialogue or scenes, and they could have sold me on it, but they really just didn't.
Yeah.
On the other hand, what they did with the final showdown between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader,
which not really a spoiler because you know it had to happen.
Right. Of course. I was really trepidatious about that. I thought that there was no way they were going to pull off that confrontation
without ruining what happens in A New Hope.
In a way that would be satisfying to the story they were telling, and also satisfying to who the characters are in the later movies.
Yes.
Or earlier
in A New Hope. Yeah.
Right. And I thought that there were some moments in there that just took my breath away that were so perfect, so well done. I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, yes, that's perfect. I was really excited by how that played out.
And also the best lightsaber stuff I've seen in a long time. The lightsaber battles.
Yes, it was a great, well choreographed battle that worked. The best battles work on a character level.
Mm-hmm.
They sell you on this is how this character would behave. This person would behave in this situation. And they tell you something, like the battle itself tells you something about who the character is, what they're thinking, where they are in their journey. And this battle did that for both Vader and Obi-Wan in a way that was just really narratively satisfying.
And I think as a whole, the Kenobi series is really about hope. He starts off as a broken man in the beginning, in a way, it's kind of Obi-Wan's new hope. Like he ends in a very different place than he begins, with a lot more hope for the future. Yes. Well, that's the thing is he's drawn out of that despair that he's in at the beginning and given a reason to hope, and that it comes in a small package, right? I mean, he's shown where the hope is. I mean, it is really, in fact, the Secrets of Star Wars, they got a feedback email from a listener today that I was looking at that really talked like they've been in this bad place lately, and the Kenobi series has really shown them, the virtue of hope has really led them to hope. So it was really kind of inspiring. And so I hope they read it tonight. If they don't read it, maybe they'll read it when they record their next episode. But definitely check that out, The Secrets of Star Wars, because it was a really good feedback.
I mean, on the whole, I think the Kenobi series is not my favorite of the new Star Wars series. It was an okay story. It was not the best story. And I think partly because we kind of all know where it's going. Like,
it's hard to tell a prequel story.
Right. As prequels go, it wasn't bad. It wasn't my favorite, but it did have some moments that were really good. And the final episode, I thought, delivered on what it could and should have been.
The best thing about it was Ewan McGregor. Like, I think he was fantastic throughout. The second best was the little girl who played Leia, who had a little bit of a rocky beginning. I know some people were at first a little bit, I loved her from the beginning. I thought she was the cutest thing, but I think by the end, I really think she had sold it as being Leia. So yeah, it was good. The Reva character, the actress was fine. It's just the character wasn't written great.
Yeah, I felt like they needed to do more with her.
Yeah.
Like they didn't quite have her motivation and her backstory. I think that if they had developed her backstory more and explained how she got from the first scene to becoming an Inquisitor,
right,
that could have done a lot. Like finding out
some flashbacks of her struggle,
finding out where she came from, how she got to where she was. I think that could have made her a much better character.
Yes,
she needed more work, more development, more writing.
She's too flat.
But she could have been a really interesting character. I wanted to like her, and I'm still kind of wish that somebody would go back and flesh her out a bit more, because
maybe they'll do a novel or something.
Because I think that she's not a bad character. She's just wasn't given her due.
What's the famous Mae West? Not Mae West, but the I'm not. No, it was not Mae West. It was Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'm not bad. I'm just drawn that way.
Yes, Jessica Rabbit.
Yeah. Now, a character that was well-rounded was Darth Vader. I think he was more well-rounded in this than he's been in anything.
I felt like what they did with Vader was just...
It sold him as Anakin on the journey through the dark side. It is better than anything he's been in, than the prequels. It really actually felt more like the Anakin of the Clone Wars.
Yes, I felt like it really felt like it tied the Anakin of the Clone Wars and, frankly, the Anakin of the Star Wars Rebels.
Yes.
Together. And it made him together with the Vader that we see in the original trilogy.
Right. And Rogue One. So, yeah. It was so good. It was good. So another thing we finished was the Falcon and Winter Soldier that we've been watching with the kids. We've watched the final episode. Really enjoyed that.
I really liked the final episode. That show ended well.
I like how, there's a little bit of a preachiness at the end, sort of an unrealistic kind of preachiness where Sam goes off and preaches at all of the world leaders.
Oh, see, I know it's cheesy. I know it's unrealistic. I loved that speech.
Well, that's the thing is,
that speech was so good.
It was so good because you want someone to do that in real life.
Yes.
And then I love how Sam handles the whole a black man picking up the shield with the American flag on it and being Captain America. I mean, sorry, spoilers. If you don't know that already, you haven't been paying attention because it was clear where that was going. And so they had to handle like, how does, especially in 2022, 2021, how do you handle that? And so the idea of, how can you do that? And they really handle that really well. I really like that. Like acknowledging, look, there's lots of problems, but
there's hope.
Right. And what do you say if as a black man, I can put on a uniform and die for my country, then I can certainly wear the flag of my country. I have the right to wear the flag of my country.
And also, I'm not giving up. It was kind of a Steve Rogers moment, in fact, where he says, I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep fighting. I'm going to keep standing up, picking myself up, and fight another day.
Yes.
The fight's not over, but I'm here for it.
Right. And especially since he's not a super soldier, he never took the serum. He's not, so it was a good ending, a good wrap up, and a good promise for some things in the future. There was some open-ended threads that got left for future stuff.
I'm looking forward to more.
Julia Louis-Dreyfus as the Contessa, though. I mean, she's kind of a funny, interesting character.
Yeah, I really want to see more of that. And I hope there's more Sam and Bucky because I think they're a great combination.
Oh yeah, any future like Captain America movie has to have the two of them. I mean, it's really it's the substitute for Iron Man and and Captain America, like the Steve Rogers and Tony Stark. You got these guys, so yeah, you definitely have to do that.
The dynamics between their characters and the way they grew together through the show, it was just so good. And
I want Bucky to start dating his sister.
Oh my gosh. If they do not include Bucky dating Sam's sister in the next Falcon and Winter Soldier
Captain America movie, whatever they do.
Whatever, I'm going to be so mad because they teased that and they better deliver. That's all I'm saying because I want to see that.
I'm there to ship them.
Yes.
And then you finally got to see, I mentioned last week that I watched the Ms. Marvel episode 3. Yes, actually we both did. That's the thing is,
no, I watched it this week.
So wait, what is the latest episode? Because there was an episode this week. So we both watched the latest episode. Put it that way.
Yes.
Okay. I thought you had not caught up, but now I realize, no, that was this week's episode. Anyway, thoughts? I
really liked it. I think that where they're going with it is fun. They're getting into more mythology.
Yeah.
In a way that like is very true to the Pakistani culture of the protagonist. And I'm really liking it. The wedding was awesome.
Especially the dance.
I loved the wedding, the dance,
the clothes,
the costumes. Yeah. The costumes are fabulous. And I'm really liking what they're doing with the characters. I think that it's a show that really is rounding out all of the characters that seemed flatter in the first episode to be really much more rounded, less stereotypical. I think both of her parents are really...
They're becoming more interesting. Yeah.
Her friends... The whole, I'm just really loving also the idea of community, which keeps coming into it. It's really a show about family and community.
And she's, as a superhero, as she's becoming superhero, she's a superhero not just for herself, but for her community, to represent her community.
Right.
And her faith.
Yep. She says in the first episode, brown girls from Jersey City don't become superheroes. But of course, that's really that's what this is. This is the Muslim girl from Jersey City, and I'm really liking the way they're telling her story.
Yeah,
she's an interesting character, and I'm looking forward to watching our teen daughters fall in love with her.
Yeah, and I liked how they're not dragging things out. Like they introduce the character, you like, I know where this character is going to go, and then they go there right away. They don't drag it out.
The pacing has been really good.
Yeah.
I feel like it's got a really nice momentum, and they're not they're using the format of the show well.
I on the one hand, I wish that the Marvel series, the streaming series, were longer. 6 episodes is really short. However, I feel like Marvel has figured out how to tell the stories in 6 episodes.
Yes.
They're not dragging it out. There's no fluff. There's no...
It feels lean.
Yeah.
In a good way.
It feels more like a long movie than it does a short TV series.
Yes. I think that it's they're telling a story that if they tried to compress it into a movie, would feel like they were shorting the story.
It would be rushed.
It would be rushed. And so what they're doing is sort of a long movie, but it's not a TV series. It's not telling that kind of a very long episodic story. It's one story that's
being told over a period of time.
Yeah, being told with a little bit more time to linger and to develop.
And I really feel like so this is what the 5th of these they've done. So they've WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, Hawkeye. Am I missing any?
The one I didn't watch was the Eternals.
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight.
Eternals was a movie, wasn't a series.
Oh, wasn't it? I thought it was
no, it's just a movie. And then this one. This is now I lost count. It's the 5th or 6th of these. I feel like they've gotten the hang of it, and frankly, I think they're doing a better job with this one than they did with Moon Knight. But also notice that so much of this, whether it's Eternals or Shang-Chi or this one or Moon Knight, they're bringing in like these other dimensional godlike beings or the Norse gods of the Asgard.
Lots of mythology. I'm here for the mythology.
Yeah, I mean the Celestials and Eternal stuff is interesting. I'm not sure I liked that as much as I have liked it in the other series, which is why I didn't like Eternals as much. You should watch Eternals just because to get that to kind of get it. I mean, there's still stuff there that's interesting, and I'd be curious on your take on it. But we're not going to watch for the kids because there's stuff in it that's not for them. But I'd be curious to see your take on it.
Yeah, one of these days.
Yep.
I'll get there.
All right. So I think that's all the movies and TV shows and books.
I think so.
Yes. So let's move on to talk about the 13th Sunday in Ordinary Time. We had Mass today at our usual parish where it was not air conditioned, but it was okay. It wasn't like I wasn't sweltering.
It wasn't too bad. I have invested. I talked about this.
I think we mentioned before.
Invested in fans, cheap fans,
folding fans. Yeah, the hand fans, not electric ones, but like just fanning yourself.
Oh yeah, they're like bamboo and silk.
Yeah,
I got a 12-pack from Amazon, and they were pretty cheap.
Like you see little old ladies in the South fanning themselves in church. so it's good. So the boys are sitting there, and the girls are sitting there in the pew fanning themselves the whole time.
They were not the only ones. I saw one of the altar servers fanning
herself with a
and several people in the congregation with pieces of paper or books or
bulletins.
Something.
Yeah. So it was hot, but not. I didn't feel like I was sweltering. It's our church is not air conditioned, but it's an old English Gothic style stone church, so it takes a while for it to heat up.
It got very tall ceilings. That helps.
Yeah. So anyway, and then the priest I think he was a visiting Jesuit, African Jesuit.
I think so.
And so he's got a strong accent, but it was a good homily.
I liked it a lot.
So the readings, to refresh your memory, the first reading was about Elijah calling Elisha, which is, the most confusing master and apprentice names in the Bible.
Right? Like somebody should have thought about that and given them more distinctive names.
Elijah and Bob would have been fine. So Elijah calling Elisha while Elisha was plowing with the 12 yoke of oxen of his parents. And then being called, and it's very cryptic. You get the sense that there's culturally stuff going on in here that I'm not aware of.
Yeah, I feel like I want to read a commentary on this that goes a little bit more into reading between the lines.
Right, because Elijah goes over to Elisha and throws his cloak over him. Doesn't say anything. And then Elisha runs after Elijah and says, let me kiss my father and mother goodbye and I'll follow you. Like, so apparently throwing the cloak over him was some signal to come follow me. A call.
It's a call.
Yeah. And then Elijah says, go back. Have I done anything to you? Well, yeah, you threw the cloak over me. But he doesn't say that.
Well, it's almost like, what have I done to offend you that you're not receiving the call properly? Like that
Right.
that you're wanting to delay?
Well, Jesus kind of addresses this in the gospel, but there's the other thing in this which is Elisha, as soon as he says that, Elisha leaves him, takes the yoke of oxen, slaughters them, burns the plowing equipment for fuel to boil their flesh, and then fed the people, and then went with Elisha.
So
I'm like, what is mom and dad thinking? You just killed all our oxen and destroyed our farming equipment. We're going to starve to death.
Well, what I was wondering is that meant to be that he's making them an offering to God? Because like they eat the flesh, but are we reading between the lines and this is a sacrificial offering?
I think that's what it is. It's a sacrifice, sacrificial offering that let me see what I'm going to look up Scott Hahn's reflection on this, see if he's got one here.
Because it's a very weird story.
I'm trying to think what he's got here. First reading, Elijah's disciples allowed to kiss his parents goodbye before setting out to follow. Well, he's not allowed. He actually tells them not to, doesn't he? Oh, yeah, he doesn't go into it. I wish it would explain. Yeah, I want to find some explanation for that. And in any case, the second reading is about do not submit to the yoke of slavery. So we have a yoke theme in there, and that we were given freedom, but we should not use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but rather to serve one another through love. Okay, so called to serve.
Our lector totally flubbed the last line in that one by dropping the not, by the way.
Oh, you are not under the law? But if you are guided by the Spirit, you are not under the law?
Yeah, he said, if you're guided by the Spirit, you're under the law.
Oops. That's completely changes what Paul says.
Like the exact opposite of what St. Paul was saying.
And then the gospel is Jesus on his way to Jerusalem passes through a Samaritan village. The people would not welcome him. And the apostles, Lord, do you want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them? They're a little too eager to smite people.
This is why Jesus called James and John the sons of thunder.
Right. Well, because it doesn't. Yeah, this in the Chosen's TV series. They actually depict this, and Jesus rebukes them like, "Easy boys." It's very easy to want to call down thunder and lightning on people, but let's back off a bit. And so he rebukes them, and they move on to another village, and people want to go with him. I'll follow you wherever you go. Foxes have dens and birds of the sky have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to rest his head. And then he says to another, follow me, Lord, let me go first and bury my father. Let the dead bury the dead. I will follow you, Lord. But first let me say farewell to my family at home. No one who sets a hand to the plow and looks to what was left behind is fit for the kingdom of God. So Father had some interesting thoughts on that. And one of the things he talked about was that Luke, this is the beginning of the journey to Jerusalem part of the Gospel of Luke, where from chapter 9 through chapter, I think he said 15, Jesus is journeying to Jerusalem for the Holy Week, for Passion, for the crucifixion. So he's journeying up to Jerusalem. And when he never completes the journey in Luke, all we get is, and then he enters the temple. Like there's no sense of the grand entrance into Jerusalem.
Right. I think he was referring specifically to the tropes of the journey narrative and that the arrival scene, which you would expect,
right,
if you were following from what you would expect literarily, isn't there.
Right.
So there is no arrival. There's only Jerusalem, and then you're left hanging.
Right. And so Father said this journey to Jerusalem in the gospel is connected to our journey to God. Our life is a journey to God. And our journey is never ends in this life. Our journey is always ongoing until.
Right. He said Jerusalem is both a literal destination, but also a figurative destination.
Right. And he talked about the church being a pilgrim church that is always journeying toward God, never completing the journey in this life. And then he says, talks about how burying the dead is a corporal work of mercy. that's like burying the dead is a good thing. So why is Jesus saying it's a bad thing? But he's not. It's that the man wanted to delay his discipleship because the father wasn't. It doesn't say that the father's dead. Like Father, the priest, said that the father wasn't dead. I'm not sure how he knew that.
I've heard that. I've read that in other commentaries before.
It might be in one of the synoptics.
That it's not. He doesn't say, "Let me bury my dead father," but something about the phrasing, which I think is maybe just not coming through in the English translation.
It might be in the Greek. Yeah.
But in the Greek, I think it's kind of more clear that the father's not necessarily dead. What he wants to do is go back home and wait until his father dies and then bury him, and then he'll come and follow Jesus.
Right. Well, I can't enter into discipleship until my parents are gone. I need to take care of them first. And what did Father say about?
I thought what Father said, this was one of those things that just like, hello, you're talking directly to me. He said, nothing must stand in the way of discipleship, no matter how noble. Parents may obstruct God's will. Our relationships may stand in the way. We need to be able to put them aside if they stand between us and God. He said there will always be legitimate excuses for procrastination, for delaying doing God's will. We have to let those things go.
Legitimate excuses.
Right. He says these things aren't sinful in themselves. They're good things, but they stand in the way. They postpone our full surrender. And so ultimately we aren't following God's will.
Right. They're good things objectively in and of themselves, but they're not what God's will is for us right now. Our God's will is for us to leave those things and go. And just like when a young woman enters the convent and enters the cloister and leaves behind her family.
Right. And ultimately, our final destination is always heaven. And so the choices we make to follow God's will are to leave behind the things of this world and to go after the things of the heavenly.
How often do you hear people talk about like, I'll convert on my deathbed, or like assuming you're ever going to have the chance to have a deathbed, you don't get hit by a bus. But yeah, I mean,
I remember some time ago, maybe it was last year or the year before, there was a story that was going around the internet about a woman who had been very rich and very influential in social circles.
Oh, yeah.
Who, after her husband died, she left everything behind and went and joined religious order.
Went from her fancy socialite life in Los Angeles to a cloister in Chicago.
And I know some people who were responding online were very, very upset. They said, a mother's life work with her children is never done. Just because her children are adults doesn't mean they don't still need their mother. And how could a mother abandon her children? And I was thinking, as I was reading that response, well, isn't that exactly what Jesus does tell us to do? You need to leave behind your parents, your children, your spouse to follow God's call. Like, if that's what God is calling you to do, who are your parents, your children, your spouse to stand in the way of doing what God wants you to do?
Right. This was based on a series of tweets by her youngest son, Mark Miller. So the woman's name is Ann Russell Miller. She's a wealthy San Francisco, not LA, socialite who, after her husband died, moved to a Carmel. She became a Carmelite nun and took a vow of silence, solitude, and poverty. And just recently died at the age of 92. At 20, she married Richard Miller, who became vice president of Pacific Gas and Electric. By age 27, she had 5 kids, and she went on to have 5 more. She had 10 kids. And then later on, after her socialite life, she went out into the cloister.
And I think that it's not false that our children continue to need us as adults, that they still want to have a relationship and need to have a relationship with their parents. But at the same time, who are we to question God's call? Maybe the motherly role that her children needed most was her prayers from Carmel. Maybe she could do more good for them and for the world in a vocation of prayer than she could by being actively involved in the world. Like, we don't understand God's way when he calls us. And it seems just a little bit odd to question, like, how dare she do this? Well, how dare she say no to God if that's what he was calling her to do? Why do you think that you know better than she did what God wanted her to do in her life?
Right. There are always legitimate excuses to say no,
right,
not now.
And it would not be an illegitimate thing to say, my kids still need me. I need to be in the world for them longer, but maybe God had other plans.
Right. And if she didn't go, it's not like God would abandon her and her life would be terrible after that. I mean, I'm sure he still would have used her life for good, but maybe not as much good. And that's the big thing about the vocational call is God will work with whatever we give him, but if we do not cooperate with his will, the work may not turn out as great as it could be.
I keep thinking of the was it St. John Henry Newman said, God has created me for some particular work. I may not know what it is in this life, but he's created me to do something that no one else can do.
Yes.
And that's kind of
awesome.
Awesome, a little bit
scary
because
yeah.
Wow. And what if and you might not ever know what it was that God created you to do. You might not ever know whether or not you did it.
Right.
We don't always have
not until the next life.
Right. We don't always have the certainty of knowing, yes, I'm definitely doing God's will. Sometimes knowing what his will is a matter of blind faith.
I mean, it's entirely possible there's a very happily married woman or man out there who is supposed to have a religious vocation, but yet they're happily married, or vice versa, or a religious who was God's will was originally that they be married, and that there would have been greater fruit from the other, but God may do with what you gave him. I mean, it's something to consider. Just we don't constrict God by choosing different paths. We don't upend all of God's plans. He works. He's got his will, but he works with what we give him. That's my thought on it anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that just about does it. Yeah, I think that's all we want to say about that. So let's take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Raising the Bets, including Steve S., Mitchell R., Pat S., Al R., and Julia S. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue Raising the Bets and all the shows at StarQuest. By the way, that Pat S., by the way. It just happened to come up in the rotation. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. Thank you, Pat S. and all the patrons. So that's it from us. You can find links from our discussion in our show notes at sqpn.com/bets. That's BETTS. Send your feedback to the SQPN Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to bets@sqpn.com. Or you can visit our new StarQuest Discord community, where you can join the Raising the Bets channel at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, I'm Dom Bettinelli.
And I'm Melanie Bettinelli.
Thank you for listening to Raising the Bets on StarQuest.